Hello everyone, this is Right on My Temple. This is my first Jungle Cup tournament that I played in. I ended up going 4-0. I ran a standard lineup using Vigoroth and Noctowl, a grass Pokemon, an electric, and an anti-Vigoroth Pokemon. Seemed to work out pretty well for me. There are some things that I would change. I ended up getting a lot of these Pokemon last minute, and I would like to thank everyone who helped me out or showed up this morning to trade with me so I can get the Pokemon I need for the tournament. Going into my first matchup, I'm against Mike Weezy. He ran an interesting lineup, particularly the Pokemon Furret. I haven't ran simulations or looked at the Pokemon's moveset, but I was confident that my Vigoroth would have the upper hand in this matchup. So my goal is to try and piggyback off of the Furret, but I wasn't familiar with how long it would take to get to its first charge move, so I just fire off the Body Slam. Since I had a lot of energy farmed up, I'm able to go straight into the second one. And he shields both of it, tells me that he has a charge move ready to go. And the fact that he shielded twice tells me he has a lot of energy stored as well. I shield the first one just to see how it is. After seeing the shield is red, that tells me that I really need to shield, otherwise I would take a lot of damage from the Brick Break. And since counter allows me to gain energy quicker, I'm able to get to the next body slam. However, I'm able to feint the Furret before I'm able to use the body slam. He brings in Venusaur. I end up using Bulldoze. Looking back, Bulldoze is the least energy efficient move against the Venusaur. I swap into Noctowl to counter the Venusaur. He immediately swaps out into his Vigoroth, but since we have no shields, my charge abilities will do a ton of damage to the Vigoroth. And since I farmed a lot of energy off of the Venusaur, I know I'm able to get to a second Sky Attack before he's able to feint my Noctowl. I use the second Sky Attack, feint the Slack off. Brings in his final Pokemon, Venusaur. Looks like he had some energy stored up. He's able to feint my Noctowl with it. I bring in Vigoroth, hoping to feint it. However, he's able to get to his Frenzy Plant before I'm able to counter it to death. Feints my Vigoroth, and luckily for me, I have Magnezone in the back to feint the Venusaur to take game one of round one. Going into game two, I lead Vigoroth again, kind of expecting to see the Furt as a lead. However, he brings in his Venusaur, which puts me at a lead disadvantage. I decide to farm up a little bit of energy, and then I decide to swap into my Vespiquen. My Bug Bites do a fair amount of neutral damage to him. Being the smart player that he is, he ends up using his Sludge Bomb against me to do neutral damage to my Vespiquen. He swaps out to his Furt. At this point, I decided to chip it down with my X-Scissor. He doesn't shield it, takes a little bit of damage. Use another X-Scissor. He ends up using his first charge move. I decided not to shield it, hoping that Vespiquen would just feint. However, Brick Break is 4 times resisted by the Vespiquen. I wasn't sure if my Vespiquen was able to take another Brick Break, so I decided to shield here, allowing me to get this next switch advantage and have some stored energy to fire off an X-Scissor against the next Pokemon that comes in. He brings in Vigoroth. I immediately use X-Scissor, able to burn a shield off of that. Feints my Vespiquen. I bring in my Vigoroth because it has a bunch of energy stored from earlier. I was trying to piggyback off of him, however, I get a little impatient and I just use the Body Slam anyways. Luckily for me, I'm able to fire off another Body Slam immediately afterwards. But I was not able to feint the Vigoroth, allowing him to fire off his body slams. I shield the first one, and then similar thing happened to him where he's able to use both body slams back to back. Feints my Vigoroth, bring in my Magnezone to take down the Vigoroth. And knowing that his last Pokemon is Venusaur, I'm trying to race to my Flash Cannon. Even though Magnezone resists grass, it takes a bunch of damage. And I was able to get to the Flash Cannon before he's able to get to his second Frenzy Plant, or feint me with his Vine Whips. And then my Flash Cannon is allowing me to secure Game 2 of Round 1. Going into Round 2, I decided to switch things up a little bit and lead with my Venusaur. And luckily for me, he leads with his Vigoroth, allowing me to have the lead advantage. My goal is just to spam Frenzy Plants on him, knowing that counters resisted due to the poison subtyping of the Venusaur. However, he switches out to his Fortress, and I swap out to my Magnezone. It's a good thing to have a bunch of loaded energy on your Pokemon that you swap out. That way, when you bring it back in, you're able to fire it off immediately. I'm able to get to the Wild Charge before Fortress is able to get to its first charge ability. Since I'm not able to count the number of bug bites it takes to get to Earthquake, I decided to shield here. Unfortunately, it was the Heavy Slam. Get to my next Wild Charge, trying to feint the Fortress. However, since he baited me earlier with his Heavy Slam, he's able to get to his Earthquake, and I decided not to use two shields on my Magnezone. So I decided to let him feint right here. Knowing that Venusaur gets walled, it would take several Vine Whips to feint the Fortress, so I decided to bring in the Vigoroth. Vigoroth feints the Fortress. Very long switch. He brings in his Vigoroth, which had stored energy from the initial matchup. Decided to let the first one go through. Fire off the first Body Slam. He lets that go through as well. Immediately swap and then fire off the Frenzy Plant that I had stored from earlier. I was hoping to burn his second shield. However, he just lets his Vigoroth feint. He brings in his last Pokemon, which is Raichu. I know Venusaur has a fairly good matchup in here. I decided to use the first Frenzy Plant. He's forced to shield. And since now I have the shield advantage, I'm able to shield his charge ability and then get to my next Frenzy Plant and then secure Game 1 of Round 2. Going into Game 2, I decided to lead the Vigoroth again. He brings in his Raichu. As long as I match shields with the Raichu, I should be on top of this. Trying to piggyback off of his charged ability. Should be the Brick Break. Shield the first one. Fire off the Frenzy Plant. He gets a really good switch here onto his Vigoroth. However, he locks in his Vigoroth, which allows me to switch into my Venusaur. And since he has a shield advantage on me, as long as he shields my Frenzy Plant, he's able to feint my Venusaur. He uses the first Body Slam. I let it go through. Follow up with the Frenzy Plant. He ends up shielding it. Probably means he has a Body Slam coming up. He does get to his Body Slam. Decided to shield here because I have a Frenzy Plant coming up as well. I use the next Frenzy Plant, thinking that he would let his Vigoroth feint. However, he shields here. He's trying to feint my Venusaur to get the switch advantage. Takes down my Venusaur. I bring in my Vigoroth. I'm able to farm a couple counters off of his. He brings in his Raichu. I immediately fire off Body Slam. I wasn't sure how many Thunder Shocks he had, and I did not want my Vigoroth to faint this early. So I swap into my Magnezone. Luckily for me, he uses his Wild Charge on it, allowing me to absorb his energy on a Pokemon that would resist it. He swaps out to his Fortress. Use my first Wild Charge, and luckily for me, it takes several Bug Bites for his Fortress to get to his Heavy Slam. So I'm able to get to my second Wild Charge. Puts me in a pretty good position. Feign his Fortress. He brings back his Raichu. We simultaneously feign each other with our fast attacks, allowing me to secure round 2. Going into round 3, looking at their lineup, they had 4 Pokemon that would go either even or lose to my Noctowl, which is why I led the Noctowl. We end up leading the same Pokemon, so it's all about the charge move priority, as well as who's able to piggyback. So I decided to let her use her first charge ability, then I will try to piggyback off of that. Let it go through. I successfully piggyback off of it. Tells me that I will have the priority for the next Sky attack. Get to the next one. Just use it immediately. Hoping to burn a shield. If not, feint the Noctowl. She ends up using a shield. I decided to use a shield here. Try and maintain the switch advantage. So I keep using my fast attacks to try and get to my charge ability. Use the Sky attack first. Either she'll shield it to maintain her switch advantage or just let it faint. She brings in her Vigoroth. Luckily for me, I'm able to get to my Sky attack before my Noctowl faints. Surprisingly, she doesn't shield it. Noctowl faints. I have to bring in my Vigoroth. She does have a slight energy advantage. I end up shielding the Body Slam. I get a little greedy over here. See if I can farm the Vigoroth and try and save my Body Slam for the next Pokemon. However, I get punished for it and allow her to get to her Body Slam before the Vigoroth faints. She brings in her Victreebel, which hard counters my Vigoroth with its Razor Leaves. So I swap out, thinking that I would have a fairly good matchup here. However, she does have a shield advantage. Get to my Wild Charge, knowing that she would shield this one. She is able to get to her charge ability, which should faint my Magnezone. And since I had a little bit of energy, I tried to race to the Body Slam before my Vigoroth faints. However, the Razor Leaf comes out too quickly and she takes game 1. After getting destroyed by her Victreebel, I decided to have Magnezone as well as Vespiquen in the back. She leads with her Venomoth. This matchup right here can go both ways depending on shield usage and ability to shield bait, but that would require the Venomoth to have the legacy move Poison Fang. She lets my first Body Slam go through. I'm debating on whether I should switch out or not. I decided to shield the first Silver Wind. This kind of tells me that she may not have the legacy move, so I go straight to the Body Slam. And Confusion being a slow move, it's up to the user to have a good grasp of how it works, because one extra tap of Confusion could lose you the match. I was able to get to the Body Slam, allowing to feint her Venomoth. She brings in her Alolan Raichu, which would counter my Vigoroth due to the Psychic typing. I get to the first Body Slam. She ends up shielding it. She could have farmed up my Vigoroth a bit. However, she fires off her charged ability. I just let it go through. Bring in Magnezone. I didn't have a really good answer to the Alolan Raichu. Thunder Punch is resisted by the Magnezone. Since she has no shields, I was going to use a Wild Charge, but she makes a really good switch. She brings in her Vigoroth. I swap in the Vespiquen, which hard counters the Vigoroth due to its bug and flying typing. I decided to protect it for no reason at all. Decided to farm up a little bit, knowing that I need my bug move to take down the Alolan Raichu. As soon as it comes out, fire off the X Scissor, allowing me to win game 2 of round 3. Going into game 3, I decided to do a reactive switch of my lead due to her Venomoth as well as Noctowl leads, and I bring in my Magnezone, and it pays off this match. I was expecting her to switch immediately. She stays in this a little too long. I'm able to get to my Wild Charge, which should tell me that she's going to use her shield immediately. She does shield. She swaps out. I wait for the switch. See that is Victreebel. Swap into my Vespiquen. Being a similar subtyping as Venusaur, I know I should be able to win this matchup fairly easily. I have my X Scissor ready, doing neutral damage to the grass poison of Victreebel. Takes a good chunk of it. Just try and farm it a little bit more. She brings in her Noctowl from earlier. I end up shielding this one, knowing that I can get to the Power Gem before she's able to get to her second charged ability. Since Vespiquen is a new contender into the Great League, not many people are familiar with the charge abilities, and I'm able to fire off a Power Gem which does super effective damage to the Noctowl, which allows me to gain a huge advantage in the final round over here. She does faint my Vespiquen. I bring in my Magnezone. I decided to fire off the Wild Charge immediately, and luckily for me, her last Pokemon is a Venomoth, which tells me I have a very favorable matchup here. I'm able to get to the Wild Charge due to the energy that I stored from the earlier matches. Chunks the Venomoth fairly low. Decided to do a sacrificial swap. Wasn't really necessary since I had a shield, but I am able to feint the Venomoth, allowing me to secure round 3. Going into the final round, I saw that he didn't have a strong answer to Venusaur, so I decided to lead with him. And I ended up getting the lead advantage over here. He switches out to his Scissor. I bring in my Vespiquen. Wasn't really familiar with the moves, so I let the first one go through. Iron Head happens to do a huge chunk to my Vespiquen's health. I use the X Scissor in response. He shields, which is good for me, since it probably wouldn't have done a lot of damage due to the steel bug typing. He shield baits me with the X Scissor. I use another one in return. He lets it go through. It actually does a very small amount of damage. I let the Vespiquen faint, and I decided to bring in my Vigoroth. I probably should have brought in the Vigoroth earlier. I'm waiting out the clock so I can switch in immediately after, feigning the Scizor. I blocked the X Scissor, thinking it was that Iron Head again. He swaps out, brings in his Vigoroth. I end up using my body slam, hopefully trying to bait out a shield. He does use his shield, allowing me to switch into my Venusaur and allowing me to quickly fire off the Frenzy Plant. It ends up feigning his Vigoroth, which puts me in a good position. He brings in his Bayleaf, and having no shields, I am able to get to my Sludge Bomb, which will do a large amount of damage to the Bayleaf. Unfortunately, it does not take him down. However, Venusaur is able to take a lot of Razor Leaves, as well as the Ancient Power that's about to come out from the Bayleaf. And I am able to take it down. And I am going to use the Frenzy Plant immediately, and I will secure game one. Going into round two, decide to play some mind games on who I'm going to lead with. I end up leading Vigoroth, and he brings in his Scizor. I do have the lead advantage here, so I was expecting him to switch out early. Stays in a little bit to farm up, get to my Body Slam. It looks like he swaps. We have a visual bug here. Farm a little bit, brings in Heracross to hard counter. I'm a little slow with the switch by bringing in Venusaur. I decided to shield the first charge ability. It is Mega Horn. Venusaur is able to win this matchup because it outspams the Heracross, so I use the Frenzy Plant. He ends up shielding the Frenzy Plant. And I try to get to the second one, however, he took me forever to switch out initially, so he had a bunch of extra energy coming in this matchup. So I'm forced to shield the second time. I use my second Frenzy Plant. He shields that one as well. And looks like I am able to get to the Frenzy Plant before he's able to get to his Mega Horn. And I feint the Heracross. He brings in his Scizor. Immediately uses his X Scissor to feint my um, Venusaur. I decided to bring Magnezone here because if he had a Vigoroth in the back, then I would have some energy stored up. And he did. So I was able to fire off the Wild Charge as soon as it came out. I swap into my Vigoroth, which had stored energy, to use the Body Slam, which feints the Vigoroth on the spot. He brings in his injured Scizor, and he uses his X Scissor against me. Takes a good chunk of my Vigoroth, and I'm able to take his Scizor down to a very low amount of HP, and I'm able to just immediately swap into my next Pokemon, which is Magnezone, and then feint it. Looks like we experienced some lag, but regardless, I'm able to win game two and secure round four. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you guys were able to learn a thing or two from this video. If you guys have any comments or feedback, please put in the comments section below, and hopefully I'll incorporate them by the next video. Thanks again.